the Ask NX and Nirovision Anything webinar. Sorry for the lateness, everybody. We had mistakenly thought we'd already started broadcasting. So I'm Tony. I'm coming to you from the North Pole.
Hi, Tony.
And Eliana, you're the TV personality. You're good at this.
Eliana is coming to you from lovely summery Sydney, Australia. Thank you for the hint, but you're the expert here, Tony. I'm just happy to be in good company and hopefully waiting for people to join and ask a lot of questions because that's what we're here for.
We got some people that jumped on.
Fabulous.
So we can do this several ways. I mean, we're here for a while. We can answer lots of questions. We can even try doing audio questions if you guys want. Just raise your hand and we can try your audio if you've got a mic. And if not, you can just write your questions in the Q&A section or in the chat, preferably the Q&A section, so we know it's a question and not just a comment. So we're ready to go.
Yep.
Any of you guys have a question for us?
What are we kicking off?
So what I was just asking Eliana was, what's the roadmap look like for Nirovision in the let's say over the next year? You guys have a yearly roadmap, or is it more like quarterly? How do you guys usually do it?
So we work in development cycles of between 6 to 8 weeks, but we schedule a roadmap for 6 months in a year.
You guys do the 6 to 8 weeks. Is that a sprint?
That's, well, it's actually 3 sprints of 2 weeks each, or 4 sprints of 2 weeks each, depending on the workload. And we get together at the end of the sprint, obviously, to do a retro and to assess the features when we release them to prod. But we work in those short periods. But obviously, even in a 6 month forecast, we would never have seen 2020 happen. So that doesn't necessarily work, right? But what we're working on right now is most of our customers who are using Nirovision have been using different types of forms to ask COVID-related questions, whether that is restaurants, aged care facilities asking about immunization records, or even typical offices where employees come and go and they get asked if they lived in a hotspot, something that in Australia is happening quite a lot. So the request came from the fact that those forms are usually stored on third-party databases with very little control and with very little encryption or security features. So because Nirovision is a platform and we call that an identity platform and we track individuals, they wanted the ability to store those forms with Niro. So we are working on the ability to use Doorkeeper, our display solution, to display individualized QR codes that individuals can scan from their phone, pop up that questionnaire with whichever questions you want, and store those results against the corresponding identity. So you don't have 2 disparate databases with sensitive information, regardless of where you live and what that sensitive information looks like. So the ability to scan individualized QR codes and store them against identities and also pull reports on that. So imagine right now you ask people to take on this procedure to feel safe and to make everyone at the venue safe, but people just skip it sometimes if you don't have anyone enforcing that procedure. So we want to be able to alert you if someone is in the venue but hasn't followed the scheduled procedure, whether that is a temperature check, the QR code form, both. Some customers do that once a day, some customers do that 2 or 3 times a day, and that is quite a hefty investment in terms of resourcing, and obviously you're exposing someone to undertake that task. So why not put machines to do that? So it made perfect sense to us. It's aligned with the vision we have for the product, which is the ability to track individuals across a space, repeated traffic and whatnot. And also you get the benefit of storing that information alongside all the other sensitive information that Niro is already collecting securely on an encrypted server.
I have a different question. It's completely unrelated, but it's something that I'm just curious about. So as an identity platform, right now, your primary asset that you use to identify someone is their face.
That's right.
Are you guys looking at other things?
Obviously, we are, but computer vision is our field of expertise, and we've been at this for quite a few years. And even though it's very easy to simplify all of that under the mode of face rec, it's not just face rec. We build a pipeline of several algorithms that detect the face, track it across the frame, assess it for quality, process it for a recognition result, and display the result. And that's a whole pipeline. We are.
Well, what I was thinking about was more like identity, like other ways of identifying an individual, like for example, like tattoos. No, I'm serious. Like
Yeah,
identifiable like marks that you know are not going to change.
yeah,
Right.
that's clever, but definitely we're not working on something like that right now, but it's something we are not just other types of. I also thought you were going down the signal road, maybe.
No, I mean like other like for humans, I mean you have body shape. I mean as humans we recognize people a lot of different ways, right? Like we can tell people from behind a lot of times, right? Oh, I know who that is, like without even seeing their face, right? Because we're just so familiar with like the way that their body is or the way that they move or things like that. I'm just curious if you guys have thought about or explored other possible ways to like identify individuals other than just faces.
Definitely keeping an eye on everything and anything, but faces themselves are pretty distinctive in themselves. And I know it sounds pretty, it sounds cheesy when put it like that, but if you design a proper algorithm, recognition accuracy reaches the high 99%, especially if you feed that model with good quality data, which is turning to be my motto every time I speak about this. So faces, when used correctly, are pretty great. That's not to say, Tony, that there's things that could compensate. Especially in non-cooperative scenarios where people aren't necessarily exposing their face openly. When you're tracking someone who wants to be hidden, that's when you get into the troubles of trying to collect as much as you can for as much effort as you can in that scenario. But yeah, nothing concrete at the time. So we are doubling down on face rec itself when it comes to custom face detectors to avoid the problem of detecting faces with masks, something that it has been widely spoken about this year mostly. So developing our custom face detector that makes it resilient to this, but also resilient to typical poses found on security cameras, making face rec very quick and even more accurate. So push that accuracy to the highest possible level. And now that we're working on this type of, we are working mainly on this type of checking experiences, if I may call them. So this process of someone showing up to work and undergoing.
It's more like, to me, it sounds more like an enrollment process for something, right?
Yeah.
So it doesn't necessarily mean like you could use it. It's always going to be captured at the point of time of when you're going to be enrolling in the system for the most part, right?
Yeah.
Or when you're coming to do a specific thing, at like a vendor management solution or something like that, where you have like a, suppliers or logistics people who come every day, but you don't necessarily want to like, have to open the door for them every day.
Exactly. Right. And sometimes it's we tend to think about it from a system integrator's perspective, but sometimes it's very different users who have access to these different systems. So maybe whoever's controlling access control is not the same operator who's greeting people at the entrance. So the process of opening the door on an automated scenario for someone you don't know sounds pretty trivial when we're speaking about it, but that may involve two individuals running around, adding credentials manually to a system, trying to find the face between a muddiness of faces. So in principle, it sounds pretty straightforward, but in reality, that may involve a lot of pain. So automating that process, you nailed it when you say enrollment. It's all about getting these people in the system in the first place. And that's also the reason we invest heavily in building tools to maintain and manage the database, not just the recognition itself, because it's...
So you guys can add custom fields, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So couldn't you use those custom fields to create custom forms?
Well, you could, but then in that way, you wouldn't be storing that information in a form format. You would be storing that in a field that could change. So what we save right now is a copy of the form with the field answers. You can continuously fill it. These custom IDs, fields you see in the identities, don't hold state. It's just a field that gets updated. So if you have to report back on the 10 questionnaires of an individual, you wouldn't be able to do that with custom fields. You would need a form.
But if you had an enrollment process, what I was getting to was You know, a lot of the times people want to do things like create a form for enrolling a new face, and maybe they have some like specific information they need to gather at that point in time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes,
So,
then in that sense, definitely you can definitely use custom fields for that. So to give you examples, our gaming customers are storing the validity of the self-exclusion lists in those fields, external IDs for access control systems. We also store, in terms of blacklists, the validity of those blacklists, just to name a few. And then depending on the customer, some of them choose to have, instead of names, employee ID as identifiers. So maybe they store some of that information in a field too.
sense.
What is Nx's roadmap, Tony, actually, now that you ask me?
Oh, that's a good question. Right.
What features am I gonna get?
If you look at the state of the industry as a whole, right, then the things that you're going to start seeing, I think, in the next year, and you've already started seeing it, but you're going to see more of it, is, I think, smarter cameras. So
Yes.
one of the things we're working on is making sure that we support all the in-camera analytics for the different major manufacturers out there, and also looking at like ONVIC Profile G, which is like a standard way to manage storage on devices, so that you'll be able to do things like if the camera is still live for some reason, but it's lost a network connection, which is, to be honest, at this point, very rare, because if you lose a network connection, you're also losing PoE, which means you're also losing the camera for the most part. But
I was gonna say,
there are situations where people still use dedicated power supplies, or maybe they've lost their network connection, as in like their router or something like that has gone down, but their switch is still up. So those cameras would be able to record themselves, and then when they come back online, the archives would automatically be synchronized back with like the centralized archive, so you would never lose that footage. So those are the things we're looking at. The in-camera analytics plugins is extending that out to make sure it's compatible with as many things as possible. On the cloud side, we're looking at adding like cloud-based backup storage. So moving storage from local systems into the cloud for like more long-term storage, maybe longer archiving, or maybe moving specific pieces of information to the cloud, like bookmarks only.
Oh, that's very interesting. You extended that life of that metadata.
For us, yeah, we're more of a platform though, so we have to look at the core technologies that we're building as well. And since we started, we're really doing a lot more VSaaS based customers. So software as a service or surveillance as a service, which means we have to think about you know, how billing and all that kind of stuff works in the cloud as well for our third-party partners, and also our integrations marketplace will be pushed out. So we're really focused on getting more integrations overall. So most of our roadmap is pretty boring overall, in that it has a lot of, we already have a lot of the check mark features.
Yeah.
The other thing that's coming up is like rules. The rules engine is going to be redesigned to be a bit more beefy. To allow you to do like and if then type things, where you're able to do like almost like visual programming. And then the tree on the left side, we're starting to do a lot more larger systems. And when you have large systems, you have a lot of cameras, right? And so you have different operators who need to have kind of customized views of the resources they have access to.
Yeah.
So how do we make that easier to use overall? That's pretty much what our road looks like for the next year or so. It's just continuing to focus on kind of the big things that are changing in the industry and making sure we're staying on top of them. So
I may be a nerd, but that sounded super interesting to me. I don't know why is that though. I mean, I think what you say about AI analytics is incredibly interesting, because it's computing power you can put to work to pre-process results.
Yeah. You're going to have smarter rules engine now that metadata is becoming so important.
Exactly.
So it's going to be interesting, because integrators are going to not just have to be able to put these systems in, but they're also going to be able to understand how to like do more custom programming for the customers to combine a lot of different analytics to generate like events when a more complex events. right? You're going to get much more complex events going on. But it also gives you a lot more granular control and an idea of what's going on out there because of the metadata that's going to be coming in. So it's going to be an interesting time for sure. Health monitoring is always a thing too, just making sure everything's working properly still. Yeah.
Alan is asking a question, Tony, right on.
All right. Is there a way to get bookmark footage to be copied to a separate folder that doesn't get overwritten for long-term storage? Yeah, we were just talking about that, Alan. Right now, there's no way to do that. I mean, there is a way to do that, but it involves you putting in like an API call and automatically pulling out all the bookmarks and putting them somewhere for long-term storage.
Okay.
But that's not exactly what you're talking about, is it? So we were just talking about that. That's something that we have to address in the next year or so, for case management, basically, and also, like we said, for cloud-based storage, cloud-based archive. There is a company that we're working with that's really interesting as well, called Tiger Technology, and they do a bridge technology, and they used to work with Hollywood for like dailies. So like whenever you shoot like a movie, you take lots and lots of clips, and then you have to go back and edit it and pick the ones that are the best and make the movie at the end, right?
Yeah.
So the directors shoot like 100 different shots a lot of times of the same thing, and they want to pick one later on.
Yeah.
So they had to be able to back up this stuff to like a studio data center where the editors and the guys who were working on the movie were based.
Yeah.
And so these guys came up with a way to replicate your storage to any cloud-based storage location, or even a local NAS or even a remote NAS. And it's really cool. So we're going to be introducing their stuff, I think, in January as a Works with Nx partner. And they're interested in learning more about what our market wants to do as well. So bookmark backup is definitely a good question, and we're working on it.
Yeah. Plus, I imagine that depending on the industry, there are legal requirements regarding information storage. And so I imagine that this is going to come more and more.
The amount of data that's being generated is insane.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of it is being lost as well, because it gets generated, but then nobody does anything with it, and then it gets trashed, and then it gets generated, nobody does anything with it, gets trashed, right?
Yes.
So you're probably going to see AI agents that sit on top of a lot of that information and pull stuff out of it and keep the metadata in case you want to like review what happened, but not necessarily see the related video, right? So that you can get actually business intelligence out of it.
Yeah, so. I completely agree.
Who else has a question? That was a good one.
Yeah, but I think more and more to your point, Tony, that algorithms are going to sit between systems and decision makers to try to weed the noise and process signals that could be consumed in real time, in a completely unmanned and automated way, deprived of any bias or sleep deprivation that humans suffer. Alan has an interesting question.
Constant bit rate versus variable bit rate using Hikvision cameras. Is that a question, or is that like they can do that?
Maybe he's asking if we are advising one or the other. Which is
better on Nx Witness? I think the answer to that question is it depends on what the actual camera is being used for, and like what your network speed is. Because constant bit rate just says I'm definitely going to give you 3 megabits per second no matter what.
Yeah.
Right. And variable bit rate says I'm going to give you a fluctuating range based off of like motion and everything that I detect in the camera and what's happening in the camera itself. Right. Personally, I mean, I don't worry about that too much myself. I look at more how the camera's performing overall. But yeah, I think you'd have to ask Hikvision that question actually, because we're okay as far as I understand it with either one of them. So generally, like we do the optimized. We optimize the profile based off of it. And if our guys and engineers said, Carrie. our guys optimize the cameras, and they do a lot of testing before they put the optimization on it, right? And so generally, like the optimized stream that they're telling you is going to be the highest bit rate possible for the highest quality possible for the lowest bit rate possible, right? So that's medium or optimal, I think medium on our settings in the camera, right?
Yeah.
So if you're letting us optimize the cameras, then let us optimize the camera. And if they don't work well, then they don't work well, and you should tell us, right? But generally, if you go in and you try and set the cameras yourself, I don't know. It's up to you. And then
yeah.
Carrie asked, did I knit my hat? And the answer is no, I got it at Party World for $8.
Good.
It's good. Yeah.
I guess what I wanted to say, just my 2 cents on this one, is when it comes to bitrate, if your network can support it, more is generally better. Obviously, provided the network is stable enough to avoid that camera from dropping off. And the other thing I wanted to say is also we get in the server software for Nirovision, for example, we have logic that makes the server more aggressive whenever it takes a face in terms of FPS and consuming and allocating resources efficiently. So when we see motion, the server becomes a bit more aggressive and tries to get more faces than when it's sitting still. So there is logic that could be used elsewhere outside of the camera to optimize the use of resources outside of just the camera setting. But to Tony's point, if you can take it, if your network can take it, it's generally better. More is generally better. Any way of doing ALPR on non-ALPR cameras?
Yes. That's the answer. Yes, there are many ways.
Elaborate, Tony. We want to hear that.
There are many different analytics companies out there that have LPR built into it. If you go to the Works of the Next marketplace, there's like Sprinks out of Italy. There's a lot of them. There's really a lot of them, guys.
Algorithms have gotten to that stage.
Let me open it up real fast. There's I think there's Neural Labs, and there's Sprinks, and then there's quite a few of them. Or not Neural Labs, is it Traffic Vision? Traffic Vision. Hang on. Let me open it up and look.
But I imagine so.
Yeah, is it Neural Labs? On Works with Nx, there's Neural Labs that does AI traffic control solution. There's ALPR and vehicle identification from Black Box UA. There is built-in camera ones from like Vivotech. I know you just said not on the camera, but that's one. I think Auto Marshal is another one in the Works of the Next. There's quite a few of them. EV accidents. Go check the Works of the Next marketplace. There's Incoresoft Veja that just got published this week. I mean, there's a lot of them. So have a look around. Centurion, I think, does it as well. VCA, Core does it. Sprinks does it. AI Tech does it. So that's like 10 right there, Alan. They're all server side, and that's pretty easy stuff. For I mean, that was like machine learning at the beginning.
Yeah.
Right?
Text recognition. We were young and naive back then. Yeah, true. But it's also interesting. I mean, we've thought about it as well, because there's usually a one-to-one relationship between a face and a car. In certain scenarios, it's very simple to imply that. So we've been asked about that as well, and I find it very interesting, but not something we are working on. Our thing is faces, right?
Any other questions? You guys can ask anything. It doesn't have to be about our technology. We said in the invite you could ask about how you can get a PS5 for less than $1. I don't have the answer, but you can ask it.
Have you bought yourself one? I haven't yet.
I have not played the PS5 yet. I have an Xbox One.
You're an Xbox, okay.
I'm an Xbox person.
PS4 so far.
Your PS4?
Yeah, I grew up with
I never liked the Sony PlayStation controllers. I just never liked them. The little like balls, like you know what I'm talking about? Little balls on the top of the sticks.
Yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
Alan.
Post it in the
It is.
chat so Alan can jump straight on it.
Let me send it to you. It's in at my.networkoptics.com integrations.
Great.
I just sent the link.
Yeah, you have, how many are, you have a lot of integrations already on the marketplace. You know how, roughly how many?
The works of the next marketplace, I honestly stopped keeping count. There's a lot.
Yeah.
And then the more interesting is going to be in our cloud. We have the integrations marketplace, which is a slightly different one.
Mm-hmm.
So as a platform provider, C2P does it as well, Alan. And you can see that at the integrations marketplace. I put another link in there.
Oh, yeah.
So there's the works for the next marketplace, and then there's the integrations marketplace. The integrations marketplace is hosted in the cloud.
Mm-hmm.
Any end user or integrator or anyone can see it.
Yeah. When they log into their account.
Yeah, and as a platform provider, we make NX Meta, which is used to make powered by NX products. So other companies build their own branded solutions based off our platform, which is similar in the way that it works, but it has they have different integrations a lot of times. They have different markets they promote it into and different ways of promoting it, right?
Yeah.
So the integrations marketplace is a place where if you're a developer, you can integrate something. Even if you're an integrator and you do an integration, like maybe it's not worth it to you to pay for this one integration for your one project, right? Well, with the integrations marketplace, what you can do is you can pay for that integration, but then you can resell it to other integrators and other companies who may need that integration that you did, and you own the code for it. So that means that you get to determine who gets the plugin or not, right?
Yeah.
So the integration marketplace is going to be pushed through all powered by NX products. So if you're a developer or you're a company who wants to integrate with NX, you integrate once, and then you can promote your solution on the integrations marketplace, and it will show up in all powered by NX product interfaces. So like right now, I think we're getting up closer to like 40 different brands that are out there from us. We have more and more every month, but generally those are lots of different markets. But the way that video is done and the integrations are done, usually they're kind of universally useful, right? So people are going to look for, like you're asking for ALPR for your project. Well, you might need it for security surveillance, but maybe someone else needs it for their parking management solution, right? So this is the place where you can promote integrations to all the entire ecosystem, like the entire channel. So.
And I want to use this opportunity to pick up something you said before, Tony, which is that more and more we're seeing from your perspective and also from our perspective, the need to learn how to integrate a multiple set of analytic plugins or sources or signals for metadata to consolidate them into a single view. So that is a skill set that is it's high in demand. So the more you can learn about it, and I will point our audience to some of your older videos where you explain what an API is, and if you're just getting started, that is very interesting knowledge to have and a competitive advantage in a crowded market.
Yeah, I mean, integrators and guys that are doing these systems like this, the software, that the code itself and the ecosystem to do an integration, like it's gotten a lot easier than it used to be, right? Yeah. Like when I first started doing security systems integration back in like 2002, like the idea of doing an integration was you had to talk directly to the manufacturer.
Yeah.
And then they had to talk to the other manufacturer, and then they both had to get paid a lot of money, a lot of money in order to justify doing an integration. Now with things like HTTP events and actions, most of these platforms promote them because they're based off of like REST APIs or CRUD APIs. They're all very similar. So like when you do an integration these days, the difficult part is just understanding how to kind of stitch it all together and build into something that you can deploy. Yeah. But actually doing a basic integration can take you like 2 or 3 minutes. Right? It depends on how simple it is. And one of the things that you guys should think about when you're doing integrations is don't overdo it. Right? I mean, when the customer says, I want this integrated with this, they don't mean they want it fully integrated, seamless, it works perfectly in both interfaces.
Directional sync.
They have something in mind, right? And you need to clarify with them, you know, exactly what do you want? Explain to me what do you want to happen is a good way of asking the question, because they will say, well, when when this ANPR gets triggered, right, then that gets sent to the access control solution, which opens up the gate. Well, that's a really basic integration that you could probably do with just the open integration tools without even talking to anybody, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But if they say, well, I want to keep a record of every single car that comes through here, and I want to be able to open up here and display it in here and do all these other, well, then that's a whole different level of integration, right? So just make sure that you're clarifying with your customers what they mean when they say they want this to be integrated with this, because a lot of times it's only for like one specific use case and it's really simple, right? And you don't have to go through the rigmarole of saying, oh, it has to be seamlessly integrated, right? It's a trap a lot of times, especially in spec wars. Say, I'm integrated with that, right? Well, okay, I'm integrated with that too. So what? Like, but what does the actual integration mean is the question, is kind of the key point. So.
Yeah, no. Plus something in that sense, Tony, we're dealing with video, and video is, it can get expensive pretty quickly. So customers don't necessarily have the whole context of a full view of their architecture or their networking capabilities. So obviously it's easy to dream big, but part of our job is also to settle expectations and to give a functional, maintainable solution. So more and more, I completely agree with what you just said.
We agree a lot.
Must be we're on the
Who
same.
else has a question? Everybody's using the chat, not the Q&A, but that's all right.
It's fine, Tony. It's end of December 2020. We need a break.
I know.
Absolutely fine. People do you want to talk on the chat? Let's chat.
We could ask them questions.
Yeah. So I mean, in preparing for this webinar, though, I did message quite a few.
You prepared some questions. You said.
Yeah,
right,
because I wanted to ask.
Your question, Eliana.
I wanted to see. I went to ask them what before working with us, before we got into this road, what they would want to know. And one of the questions we get asked a lot is, what are the keys, or what is the most important thing you need to consider when you're deploying a facial recognition solution? And usually, oh, actually, we have a Q&A question. Would you like to jump to this one first? Because it's
go ahead.
Okay. So in this case, the typical question is, what's the variable that makes a face rec deployment work or not work? And the industry in the early days was used to hearing a lot about accuracy values, because up and coming technology, you need a way to differentiate different providers before jumping on board and testing solutions if you don't have the luxury to test multiple systems. So accuracy numbers were a big signal in the market in the early days, but the progress of the algorithms themselves and deep learning technology in general have gotten to a point where most algorithms in the market can reach the high 99% whenever they are provided with valuable data. And that's the answer to the question, in my opinion, in Nirovision's opinion in general, that the most important value or the most important variable here is to guarantee the best possible quality faces you can. And I know I'm saying this, and you're probably thinking in the most uncooperative scenario of anything with people wearing hats and obscuring their faces. But in general, the better the quality of those faces, and that means good camera placement, good quality lenses, position the camera so you get front-facing traffic, try to avoid areas that have very variable lighting, or try to create those identities with faces that represent each of those examples. So camera placement is definitely and without a doubt the single most important factor in an implementation. And sometimes that takes more than just one installation. Sometimes we place a camera working with our partners, we assess the traffic we get for a few days, and the answer sometimes is we need to reposition. And that's absolutely and perfectly normal. Because each site, it's different it's very difficult to generalize. Each site has its own particularities. So camera placement means a lot. That's
but I mean, like, a good rule of thumb is if it's hard for a human to see faces from that point of view, then it's going to be hard for the computer to do it too, right?
Absolutely.
Because the neural networks is based off the human brain.
Yeah.
So if a human can't really do it very well from like a certain vantage point, like you're looking at them all sideways and like, really, you know what I mean? It's not going to be easy for a computer to do it either, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Obviously, training data sets matters well.
True.
So Jeff, You asked what kind of deal do you set up when rebranding, such as DW Spectrum? How does that process work? So the process for building a powered by NX VSaaS solution, right, is fairly straightforward. The first step is signing an NDA. And then we go from there. So basically, we take a look at like a company, and we want to know, first of all, you know, what is the channel that they're already servicing, right? If they're servicing a channel, right? What does the channel look like? What are the markets that they address? What is the like geographic market? What are the vertical and horizontal markets they address, right? And then what is their kind of go-to-market strategy? How do they sell the product, right? And then we will basically give them a proposal based off of like how big they are, whether or not there's conflicts with like existing channel partners. We evaluate a lot of different things when we're looking at a new solution. Most of the time, partners have some form of customization that they want to have done or some feature that's important to them. So that goes into the calculation as well for how we're gonna work together. But once we start, I mean, it takes a couple weeks at minimum to rebrand the solution, just based off of like back and forth on which logos and colors you want and all that kind of good stuff. And then from that point forward, it's more of a here's your beta version, and then you get put into the release cycle with the rest of the Powered by NX products. And so every twice a year, generally, we put out major releases. We put out monthly patches with bug updates and then new features occasionally that maybe are required for like a specific project. And then one of the things that one of the reasons you want to work with us, I think, is the platform itself has, 95% of what you want most of the time if you're doing IP video in terms of like integrations, all that kind of good stuff. But also when people work with us and they rebrand it and they start to sell through their own channel, we also provide them all the professional support documentation, access to all our articles and like our technical manuals, all the translations generally, depending on which market they're in. So there's just a whole heap of other things that come along with the software that makes it really easy to get a business up and running. And like I said, generally the deals are based off of the market and the size and the scale of the opportunity, and then what kind of technology we need to add, if any, to get it off the ground. So long answer.
For products like us, it's like great because you get
What's
all
that?
these for companies like Nirovision, it's great that you guys have these type of partnerships, because that means that we do the work to develop a plugin and we effectively can target multiple markets with it, because it's effectively the same architecture. So it's pretty interesting from a business perspective as well, and as a user, obviously.
Yeah, it's very we stay in our lane. Our lane is a open video platform, right? So you won't see us doing deep learning analytics. That's not our wheelhouse. Like, we're not in that lane, right? That's where Nirovision, and even deep learning, I mean, as Nirovision can tell you, the biggest, and correct me if I'm wrong, Eliana, but the highest difficulty for deep learning driven applications is training your neural network, right? Because you're basically training someone to be the best at like face recognition, right?
Yeah.
Like the best of the best, right? And it's like you have to, like, your data determines how accurate your system is going to be. So if you have bad training data, you're going to have bad results, right? And even if you have good training data, if you don't train it properly, you're going to have bad results, right? So it's complex, and everybody working together with different disciplines in an open way results in a better IP video market for the whole, because it gives integrators and companies the ability to create better products and systems out there for their customers, but also more customized systems. And as an integrator, I mean, that's what you want to give. You want to give your customer something that nobody else can do, so that your customer is going to stay with you because you're giving them what they want, and you can do it in a way that nobody else can do it, right?
Virtuous cycle, that's what it's called.
Virtuous cycle.
Yeah.
That Aristotle.
Yeah.
All right. I can see how Nirovision can be a powerful platform. Carrie says,
Oh, thank you, Gary.
why did Nirovision win the award in 2019?
Oh, so that's an adorable story. So we launched Niro has been around for 3 years now. We were working under a different brand before. Bye, Tony. So we at that time in 2019 we went to ISC West after releasing the first version of Niro to production, and we won the best new mobile app. And the feedback we got from the industry was pretty heartwarming. We were told that this was an industry that needed disruption. And we weren't particularly coming from the security industry ourselves. We have industry knowledge, but we're software developers. So they told us that they really saw the difference in UX, and the industry itself foresees that UX is going to be one of the key differentiators when it comes to, because we all have users in the end, right? It might be more specialized, more or less trained, but we all eventually end up with a user. And users are picky, and they need to be treated with respect. They need something easy to use. They need something fast and that works for them. And to your earlier point, they need something that's customized to their needs, because there's so much out there that why wouldn't you sell with something that fulfills 100% of your requirements if you can? So at that time, that's the reason that we won that award for. And it's heartwarming to see we've come a long way 2 years down the road. Selling essential software for essential workplaces now.
UX is going to be critical, I think, in determining like which, and you guys know this. I mean, you can look at products that have been out for a long time and immediately see them as like when they came out, right? So like, oh, that one came out when Windows 95 existed, right? I mean, a lot of people get stuck in their UX and their UI.
Yeah.
It's something that every company struggles with.
Yeah.
A lot of UX and UI designers, they're designers. They think they know best, right? But a lot of the challenge, I think, is I think there's a good thing out there right now, which is that smartphones and the smartphone war basically made operating systems reconsider and browsers reconsider, and companies who do large stuff like Google reconsider, how do we make this usable across all different devices? So you get things like material design and then
design systems.
Windows. What's the Windows name one? Eliana, what's the name of the Windows one? Yeah. It was not Metro. It was Metro before. That was a disaster. But
maybe someone in the audience. Yeah, it escapes me.
I can't remember off the top of my head. But you get like Google Design, Material Design, which is like, and honestly, Material Design is probably the most prevalent one out there right now, because it was generally the most well thought through, right? In the way that it was implemented and the way that it was set up for mobile devices and everything else. And I think if you look at Nirovision's UX, it's pretty material designy, right? Which means it's really usable and really nice. And I think that's one of the things that companies need to do, is they need to stay on top of what is the most used UX language out there, because it allows you to put out product that doesn't require you to train your users on how to use it. It's all pretty easy to understand, and you can kind of self-explore the interface to find the different parts of it that make sense. So.
And I think it takes a little bit of a reality check to acknowledge you're a user of a lot of apps, Tony, and so am I. And I mean, let's be real. There's some apps that you hate, and they're horrible, and they make your life difficult, and they make you feel like an idiot, and that's awful. So it definitely plays, and I know the security industry itself obviously is specialized knowledge, and we're very smart people, but we're also users, and that's not a negligible portion of the development work. So definitely agree.
Are there any other questions?
Oh, what does the industry want to know?
Anything. We can try an audio one if somebody raises their hand.
Come on, all those shy audience members. I'm sure there's an itching question somewhere out there.
What am I drinking in my cup? I'm drinking coffee that I did as a pour over, Carrie. It's my Chengdu Starbucks cup that I got in Chengdu, China when I lived in China.
Oh,
I did the Starbucks cup collection for a while.
me
I even
too.
have a fake one from like Istanbul that's definitely not a Starbucks cup, but it looks like one.
When did you stop?
When there were Starbucks everywhere.
Yeah.
At that point, it was like, okay, it's not that cool anymore.
Yeah.
Is it cold in that room, or am I burning up? It is pretty cold in College Station today, actually. And this jacket is like a Dickies, like Carhartt type thing. Dickies, I think. So it's not that thick.
Okay.
And the hat is making me kind of warm, but
Your cheeks are rosy. Yeah.
I know I'm going with the whole Santa theme. So
You have a Christmas look.
it is quite warm, I'm not gonna lie, but I did this for you people. So. We should consider a morning show, Carrie says. Carrie, what are you shopping for? Here's a question for you.
Yeah, I mean, let's have Carrie.
What are you buying? It better not be a PS5. We've already covered that one.
Well, if he has an extra one, he can ship one to Sydney for me. Maybe I'm all for it. I'm thinking, what questions have I gotten lately?
I don't know. What do you have? Do you have any questions for me, Eliana?
Well, I asked you about the roadmap because I wanted to know about that. But actually, as Nirovision, we would love for NX to send us more filtered video streams, for example, with some of the features you discussed.
What does that mean, a filtered video stream?
For example, you were thinking about taking advantage of in-camera analytics. So do you envision, for example, that eventually we may be able to get an RTSP stream that's filtered, or that's maybe just an RTSP stream with just faces? So pre-filtering at the NX level.
Oh, like Precursor?
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's something I think that you guys can do that now with the metadata SDK, though, right?
Yeah, we can, but not everyone. So that's why I was wondering.
Yeah. No, I think that we will do analytics at some point, but it'll be stuff that's universally useful.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, so we have an OpenVino based plugin, object plugin for people detection, and all it does is detect people.
Yeah.
Right. And so that can be used in a lot of different ways, right? One of the ways it could be used is, and that's where the events rules engine is going to become much cooler when you do the visual programming side of it. One of the things you can potentially do is say, okay, run OpenVino and just look for people, right? And if a person gets detected in this camera, we'll then record it, of course, but also send this to Nirovision and see if it's someone that we know, right?
Exactly.
But you don't have to use it all the time. And so what you could do, what could be coming, and I think is probably coming longer term, is how do I buy licenses from Nirovision, let's say for 10 cameras, but I use them on the fly between all my cameras, depending on what situation is happening in each camera, right?
That's beautiful.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
Making it to the Hive architecture as well. So imagine from different servers, different inputs. Yeah.
You guys need to run on the CPU, or at least on like Windows or Ubuntu, because then you could put it all on the same machine, right?
Yeah. Well,
one of the challenges with the deep learning stuff right now is, I think the single largest challenge is, what hardware do I need for this, right?
Yeah.
It's a struggle, because designing systems for deep learning is difficult because of that question.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, we do a lot of speccing and sizing with our customers in the early stages of the sales process because of that. It's getting better though, Tony. It's getting, I mean, 5 years from now, you needed quite a beefier machine as opposed to now, which a CPU, a GPU, a small GPU, you don't have to go to the 30s, the higher 30s graphics cards, and it still supports quite a few cameras. So it's definitely trending in the right direction, but we hear that too. All our NX customers want to reuse the NX server and use it for Niro, and they are sad to hear that's not the case. On the other side of the table, obviously, it's comfortable to have the sole disposal of the resources in this case. but it is trending towards smaller architectures, and that's definitely something we're keeping an eye on.
Are you guys, yeah, I think I asked you this question before. You guys are looking at getting your algorithm into cameras itself?
Not in the short term, because of how it's getting smaller, but it's not ready to be put in camera yet. And we also, the server itself also does a little more than just detection and recognition. It also processes video feed and whatnot. So it's not a trivial amount of work, but everything is trending into that direction, Tony. I want to be able to say you can run here on a Raspberry Pi with Nx like you do. But I also have to be realistic with the architecture we have right now. So not in the short term, but something definitely considering.
Yeah, well, I think if you look at the camera manufacturers out there, a lot of them are coming up with their application layer, like OSS, was it OSST? And then like the Bosch-based, Android-based camera stuff. And then you've got the you got Vivotech, you got Axis has had an ACAP for a long time. But a lot of the camera manufacturers, because the chips are becoming cheap enough that they can overpower their cameras, they have the opportunity now to start offering extra resources on the camera to run applications. And if you think about it, it makes a lot of sense to do the recognition right there for the most part, or at least precursor stuff, because then you can really include that data with the stream. And that's what we're doing with the SDK-based integration with a lot of the in-camera analytics that have object detection now, is that information just comes in with the video stream itself. And so you don't need any third-party hardware or anything like that. And it's not, there's no bottlenecking there because it's being generated at the edge, right? So.
Yeah, if I had to be a devil's advocate, the only negative aspect of that is obviously you have one extra point of failure and your network needs to be stable. So if you have dodgy internet, that's not gonna help. But that's not gonna help with a server either. So it's definitely worth considering.
Yours is Jeff just asked a question. You guys work on GPU or CPU and GPU, or just GPU?
So what we recommend for single camera setups can run on CPU only. So if you have one camera, you're good with a CPU. For multi-camera setups, we recommend the GPU because that's when you start getting more traffic to deal with. So smaller setups, test setups can run on a CPU. We have a few customers that have just a single camera at the entrance. In some cases, a thermal unit. In some other cases, it's just a face red camera that greets people as they come in. And those setups can run with CPU, but when you start adding more than one camera, you need a GPU. That being said, though, again, it's not a GPU in the 30th ranges. It can be as small as a 1060 GTX NVIDIA card, 1660 actually, the updated model, which is a couple $100 GPU card.
Eliana, is it? I guess Jeff's question is a different. He's asking something bigger than that, right? Which is that, let's say, is the number of, I mean, the reason that GPUs work so well for deep learning stuff is that the architecture for GPUs, like you have like 256 cores on a GPU, right?
Yes.
So multi-threading and everything's better, the way I understand it at least, right?
No, you're right.
And that also, like OpenCV and a lot of the deep learning tools have been optimized for GPUs so that they run better anyways, right? Exactly. But then you got Intel who's like going to battle with like NVIDIA, right? Yeah. And they're making like more and more cores on their CPUs, and they're also embedding GPUs on the core itself, like with the quick sync, right? Exactly. So then at what point, I think Jeff's question is what, like if you have a 16 plus core CPU, is it gonna work as well as a GPU or not?
I have to say I lack the technical knowledge to answer that question precisely. What I would say, Jeff, is that if you have one camera, you can run it on an i5, and that works perfectly. If you have 4 cameras, you need a 1660 GPU because you start getting into the nitty-gritty of the resource of the CPU. Hopefully there come a point where maybe we don't even need a GPU anymore. So that's what it's trending towards in the Intel case at least. So
yeah, they're making really powerful CPUs, and they're also optimizing their code base as well for OpenCV and stuff like that, so that they should be able to do pretty well with it, right? We work with different facial recognition manufacturers. Some of them are purely CPU based, some of them are GPU based, some of them are both.
Yeah.
It really depends on, I think a lot of it on the underlying architecture, the software that they've used, because that determines how well it's going to be able to utilize the hardware that it's using.
That's
But in general, I think it's fair to say at this point in time that you can, if you're doing server side neural networking based or deep learning or AI driven stuff, computer vision applications, you're probably going to need a GPU most of the time, unless it's like something real basic like ALPR or AMPR, and then you're not. But if it's object detection and it's facial recognition where you're looking at many different data points at the same time to actually make a decision, then GPUs are more optimized for that, and so you should count on GPUs. The struggle is buying servers with GPUs in them is difficult as well. So like this is what makes analytics so difficult overall, is like all the moving bits and pieces, right? And so one of the things that makes it easier to consume is like an all-in-one type device where you can kind of count on it. Like, I'm going to buy this box that's going to do this many channels, right? Yeah. But then you're shipping metal all around the world if you're selling internationally, and shipping metal is expensive. So there's all these different bits and pieces that go into it, right? So.
I think that's why it's important that you, no matter what vendor you choose to work with, that you choose someone that you can work with on these terms, because it's very difficult to give away a recipe that's gonna work for everyone. You have to really do the heavy work and the legwork of talking to the customer, knowing exactly what they want, and then speccing the perfect solution for them, as opposed to just, obviously it would be great to get a box that you can plug and play and off you go. And this is something we're also keeping in mind and working towards, but for the time being, you have to, spec it out. Me?
I had a follow-up question for you on that. Yeah, do you guys have a calculator?
We do, but we have it available to our partners through a web app that we call the Partner Portal. So outside of the Nirovision apps, the dashboard that I always show, and the mobile apps, we support our partners by giving them a web browser that has access to some of the status of the cameras and whatnot. And there's a calculator there. But then I will also always encourage them to, especially if you're new to these type of deployments, some people have done that for years and they're pretty well versed into speccing that out. But if you're new and you're figuring out how this works, involve us earlier in the stage and we'll help you get there. But yeah, we have such a calculator.
That's important.
Yeah.
Our calculator needs to be improved.
Ours too, Tony. So it's part of our to-do list.
Always. Yeah. Maybe you can design ours at the same time so that we can have a nice UX. Because our calculator, I designed it like 6 years ago and it was just real quick. And then it was like, oh God, this could be way better, but okay, this is good enough.
Don't be hard on yourself. Sometimes function over form. That sometimes is the case.
No, it was just bad overall. So it was, well, we had to have it. So it was better than the previous one, which was really bad.
See, that's progress.
Who else has a question? We set aside like 90 minutes, but we don't have to do the full 90 minutes if everybody's all questioned out. Hey, I have a question for you guys, and you can just type the answer in the chat. How many of you guys are integrators versus like manufacturers versus well, I guess that would be it, right? Integrators, manufacturers, end users. And you can just write it in the chat. And meanwhile, Jeff asked the question. Nx Witness can run pretty well for a few cameras on a Celeron processor. Actually, Jeff, we should be able to run really well on a Celeron processor, like 64 to 120 cameras, depending on which Celeron processor it is. But would Nirovision work on a Celeron PC with an NVIDIA GPU, or does it need a certain level of CPU?
Yeah, you need to start with the lowest we can go. We used to be able to run on an i3. We haven't tested that in a while. i5 is the lowest we go to. Just to full that explanation, when you flash a server with Nirovision OS, we take over it. We have a custom implementation of Linux that's called the Niro OS, and it becomes an appliance. So we take the whole server and own it as part of the installation process. So eventually you don't interface with the CPU or the GPU anymore. We take care of that with our server software. But yeah, good. That's a good question actually. So you should run, you say NX should run great on a Celeron.
Yeah, we can do 128 dual streaming HD cameras on a single core of a Core i3. So a Celeron these days, we said that like 3 years ago. So like a Celeron these days is probably more powerful than like a Core i3 was back then. Who knows? But we're like, in general,
yeah,
you're putting in professional systems for people.
Yeah.
When I was working for an integrator who we sold a lot of Lenel, we did like, we worked on like Dell, and we did like Dell's global security standards for Lenel, right? And the nice thing about working with Dell at the time was Dell was testing all the Lenel hardware for MTBF times, because Dell could do that, right?
MTBF?
Mean time before failure.
Oh, yes, got it.
Right.
Sorry,
so like
the
hardware, it's a hardware thing, right? And so what Dell did, and I've used this rule ever since then to design systems, and it's always worked out for me. So what Dell did was they took these access control boards, and then they ran an MTBF time on them, because access control is very sensitive, right? And they want to know, what is the likelihood of these boards failing? How much backup should I build into my system, basically? Yeah. And then they ran them, and they tested them, and they came up with a conclusion. And the conclusion was, if you run the boards at 30% capacity, then they will never fail. They have like an MTBF of like 1,000,000 years, because the heat the level of entropy on the board itself, just never reaches, the heat doesn't reach a point to where the board's gonna ever have any major stress, right? So one of the things that I always recommend when you're designing like a server for NX Witness is don't design it so that your server is always running at below 30% CPU. Because then you're never gonna like see a failure of this device. You're just never gonna see it unless the power supply goes out, right? Which is easy to fix, or like a fan dies, which is also easy to fix, right? And if you're running below 30%, even without a fan, because the control boards are fanless, remember, you're gonna be at such a low level of heat and entropy on the device that it's unlikely to ever fail. Right, so don't take a Celeron processor and put 120 dual streaming HD cameras on it and run it at 85%, because it's probably going to fail in like 6 months just because of heat, right? Because you got to remember you're heating up this chip, and it's nanometers of like
circuits, yeah,
it's like nanometers of like I forgot the word for it, but its tolerance is like nanometers. So if any of that swells too much, your chip's gonna break, right? Yeah. So just think about it from that perspective. Try and over design the hardware for your systems, because number one, software over time always uses more resources. Yeah. Because if you make it, it's like a buffet, right? You made it available, I'll eat it up. All right, it's a giant buffet, right?
Oh, you're making us sound too eager. It's not. We can be also efficient in that.
No, but I'm just saying, if it's a buffet, like
I go straight to the
software developers, just like human beings, if you put out a buffet in front of them, even if you're a very disciplined person, you're still going to gain weight because there's just food everywhere all the time, right? So software developers will always use more and more resources because they know those resources are available on the mass market, right? So if you over design your hardware at the beginning of a project, the hardware is going to last longer for you in the long term, and you're going to have fewer problems, right? Is the key point. No, so don't underspec your hardware. And also explain it to your customers. I think a lot of times end users or integrators are afraid to tell a customer, hey, this is good for you. And that's why I quoted it, right? One thing I did when I was an integrator was I always gave 3 options to the customer. The cheap option that I know is going to be competitive with my competitor, right? And that I would really never recommend using, but here you go. I mean, it meets the spec, right? It's the cheapest possible option. And then I have a middle option, which I think is generally a really good one.
Yeah.
right? And then I have the if you just gave me unlimited budget
Yeah.
solution, where I say, well, this is what I really think you would be really happy with, but you know, this one also is really good, and this one I would tend to stay away from, but you can do it, and it's competitive with everybody else that's offering. And that way I could have a conversation with them about what they think is truly critically important and what's not important for them, right? So
the key was the word conversation there, Tony. And I also say you as Nx and Nirovision to provide resources for you to have those conversations. So after Shah's webinar, we created that privacy guide that eventually will make it to everyone's inboxes. And that guide helps you ask those questions to your customer. But these type of question, networking, even the specs of the comms room, requirements written down. Sometimes not even customers know exactly what they want, and they rely on your expertise to help them navigate all these myriad of software applications that could work. So definitely conversations.
yeah, and over explanation is never bad per se, because whoever you're talking to has to explain why they made a decision to someone else. And if you give them all the evidence they need, that here's the reasons why we're recommending this, and this is why it's over the budget of this person, but I think it's much better because of all the logic behind it and all the thinking that went behind it. A lot of times you'll win projects. My very first project I ever won in Shanghai, right? It took me like a year because Shanghai was weird, right? And I was like a young white guy walking around Shanghai speaking partial Chinese to people. And so like I had met a guy, and he was actually from Australia, and he was a design consultant, and he was working on a pretty well-known company. And my integration company gave him a quote, and I gave him a quote, and I did the 3 option thing for him. And then my competitor gave him a quote, and he called me and he said, you know, hey, the one you recommend is 3 times the price of your competitor, right? And he's like, but I believe you, and I want you to come and talk to me about why it's 3 times better, because I have to recommend to the customer which security company to go to. And he said, I think you're the guy, but you're 3 times the cost of them. So I need to understand it so I can explain it to the customer. And I spent an hour and a half with the guy, and I went through all the things about the system and I looked at the competitor's solution, and I said, well, you know, here's the difference between these two. And I pointed out to him where I thought their solution would fail versus why I designed it this way and why it cost 3 times as much. And then I got constant business from the guy, because not only did we do what we said we were going to do, his customer loved it, perfectly happy with it. And to be honest, security systems on a project are like the last thing that anybody thinks about.
True.
And so usually they're not even properly budgeted for, right? So if you go in with a solution that's going to make other parts of that project's life a lot easier, then they'll take budget from other parts of the project, because usually they've over budgeted for like design and stuff like that, and they'll dump it into security because you just came up with this great solution that's going to make them look awesome, right? So, you know, don't be afraid to have real conversation with your customers, and don't be afraid to overquote something sometimes, or offer multiple different versions of it, because a lot of times people haven't even thought through, right? Yeah. Like Eliana said, they just got a spec from their headquarters that says they have to have video. That's it.
We are assets too. Use us to help you put together that case. That's what we're here for.
Absolutely. All right. That was a long explanation.
It was a great explanation. I think it's important that people know how these type of conversations happen. Absolutely.
I think a lot of these guys do, but it's good to hear it again, I think, every once in a while.
I mean, if everyone wants to share their story of how they won their first project, I'm here to hear it.
Nobody answered whether they're end user integrators, though, so I don't know if we can count on them for stories.
It's okay.
All right, any more questions that we can give long answers to?
If everyone is there, though, Tony, they can email those questions and we can answer them later. Or we can do a back from holidays session and pick these up again.
And you're gonna be away for 2 weeks starting when?
Monday, yeah. So just 2 weeks.
That's through the New Year's?
That's right, yeah. So back on Monday the 3rd, ready for 2021. Just forget
It's gonna be
everything
the
else.
weirdest New Year's, man. It's gonna be the weirdest New Year's. There's gonna be like you know, like the New Year's kiss is not gonna happen for most people this year. It's just not gonna happen.
It's true.
How many people are on this Zoom webinar? Oh, there's a lot, Jeff. There's like we'll say they what close to double digits. I think everybody's webinared out, Jeff. Like I'm webinared out. This is like our 92nd webinar this year.
Oh, we're so close to 100.
I know. We should just throw 8 in and just not even do them.
We do an advent calendar of webinars.
Yeah. We got, well, we're 10 days from Christmas now. Or you guys are 9.
Yeah,
right?
it's 16 today.
All right. Well, I don't think we're going to get any more questions.
Tony, I think it's absolutely okay, right? We've answered a few and we had a few chats and a few laughs. I think it was useful. I'm ready to call it if you are as well.
Everybody, you got I'm going to give you 10 seconds to ask a question. And if we don't get a question in the next 10 seconds, then Eliana and I are going to bounce and call it a year for the webinars.
Oh, so this is officially
glad you guys are on
one.
the last, you're on the last webinar of the year. Jeff, I know you've been on a lot of them, buddy. So I appreciate it.
True. Yeah, exactly. Thank you, Jeff.
I think a lot of the Shahan and I think Peter, like they look familiar as well. And there's Albert and there were a couple guys on earlier. We get it's good to see the familiar faces coming around. And if you guys have ideas on the other types of webinars you guys would want, since you do attend,
absolutely.
Feel free to email us and let us know what you're thinking. So 10 seconds has passed.
All right, Tony. Thank you.
All right. All right, everybody. Thank you guys for coming. We appreciate you letting us take an hour and 15 minutes out of your day. Sorry for the late start.
I'm sorry. Yeah, that was entirely my bad. Tony had nothing to do. I'm so sorry.
Oh, no. I should have noticed it never said we're not broadcasting. So.
Thank you for your time and for your work this year, Tony. We really appreciate you.
I appreciate you guys too.
Merry Christmas, happy holidays, whatever your flavor of choice is. Hope 2021 starts great.
Happy Hanukkah.
Yeah.
Crazy Kwanzaa. All of them.
Thank you.
All right, guys. Bye, Eliana. See you later.
Bye, Tony. Thank you.
Bye. Have a good New Year's, guys.
You too.